But does anybody in the room want to start us off? Are there any particular burning question? That the first one's always the hardest one to ask, isn't it? If not, I'll start off with one of our streaming questions. Okay, I'll start off with one of our stream questions. Well, in fact, it's two or three, because we heard from Sally Thieman's commented actually from good to great right at the start, to saying she wanted to highlight, thought it was important to highlight the amount of support which is available to people who want to go in a different direction as a result of what's happened in the last 18 months, start up a business as a result of taking different choices. But then there was a couple of other people who commented on, do we need to be doing more to signpost people to where they need to start to look for things when they do want help? Is there almost too much out of there? Do we need to join things up more? Who wants to go on that one? Go on then, Mark. Yeah, okay.
I think that echoes part of that discussion in that group about that simplification. Firstly, where do I go is a question for a lot of people. And once they get there, how simple is it to navigate? I think that's what we've got to aspire to do. The point was made in one group about, and that's the point about intermediaries. Actually, there are people also that are interfacing with business that can help that by just making that connection. And of course there is this churn, remember, and there's this kind of start-up rate. So you've got to keep doing it because business is changing all the time as well. So I think those are the kind of key things. So I think it's a great question. The point is we've always got to do more, but we've got to make it more simple.
We'll go right to left to start with. Tracy, go on.
Yeah, and I think what was really fascinating around at the very beginning of COVID pandemic and was the how businesses turned to the local authority very quickly for support, collectively. What do we do? How can you help us? And certainly at Shropshire Council and the authority I was working at the time, put in measures really to wrap around those businesses and bring it all together. And I think that economic task force has continued on with that work. But there's, it's about where's the front door for businesses, and we perhaps need to be a bit clearer about that. We would always say, well, come to the local authority. There's the growth hub as well, so businesses can come there, and there's a whole raft of support that they can get. There's business events, and certainly Emma in my team has said it's just been huge. Businesses have really sort of looked towards the growth hub for that support. So there's quite a lot out there. It's just knowing that front door, where to go for businesses, and being a bit clearer about that, which is something we need to take away.
James, where are you on this one?
Well, I think there's probably 2 points that it's worth making. One is that colleges, talking really now, from that college perspective, we're able to deliver anything that business requires. The challenge is that business is going to have to invest in what it is that they want us to deliver. And if what a business requires is the investment from government funding streams, what comes with that is a level of regulation and a definition that is perhaps not meeting the bespoke need of the individual company. Now, one of the ways in which I think a county deal would be really powerful, having had conversations with Mark about this, is if we had some exemptions from some of the regulations around the way in which adult funding was used, we could much better meet local need and demand. And then the answer to the question is, your local college is your one-stop shop. You give us a call and we'll put in place what it is that you need. But at the moment we can do that, but to do that we need you to recognise that there are things that we will have to put in place that perhaps will have to be paid for by the employer rather than by the government.
And in the panel debate that I sat in from this, there was a question about should there be more of an onus on business to actually communicate with colleges and higher education to actually tell them what it is they specifically want?
I mean, it's always helpful. I mean, any form of dialogue, and talking more is always better than talking less. I mean, I think businesses are pretty good at telling us the things that we need, but it changes, doesn't it? So it's a constant dialogue, and I think it's really important that's what takes place. I mean, as a college, we work with about 200 employers in Shropshire, about 300 in total.
Ed, any thoughts on
Well, I
this?
think one of the things that came out in some of the discussions we had was that businesses, particularly new businesses or people running small businesses, don't necessarily see themselves as business owners, and it's actually how can we simplify the messaging of what is available, and then, for example, if they want to access some of the grants, that is often very off-putting. It almost closes the door straight away about filling them out. So whether there's opportunities around video streaming to demonstrate how to fill in the grant forms, where there's support, and also using case studies from successful businesses elsewhere, sort of the peer-to-peer. But I think there's an opportunity there around sort of the video streaming element, because nowadays, if you want to find out how to do something, you often turn to that mechanism to work out how to change the clock on the cooker, for example. When the clocks change, it provides you with that at the fingertips information that's readily available. And I think there's plenty of opportunities there in Shropshire to do that. So people starting new businesses or existing businesses wanting to grow, access grant funding and the wider support that's out there, they can do that quite easily.
If you've got a tutorial on the clock and the cooker, let me know, we'll talk later, because I can't do that either. Is there a debate to be had as a result of this about maybe the need to simplify? Is there too much information out there, perhaps, or not?
There is, and it's a difficult landscape, isn't it? Because you've got to remember that, you know, some of the business support organisations are also membership organisations, and there's a subscription part to that. But it's all part of that rich tapestry of where you go to that works for you. I think from my perspective, it's how do we just get it all to kind of work together really well. So it's not kind of treading on any toes, it's just the collective kind of lift. You know, and it's in our interest that all those, whether it's trade bodies or sector representation organisations or the Growth Hub, that they're all kind of, you know, lifting in some way. But the key bit is, if you want support, you know, how simple is it to kind of access it? Now, in some ways, is there no wrong front door? So if they turn to Richard or they turn to Mike or they turn to the Growth Hub, actually that doesn't mean it's the wrong door. If it's beyond any one of their reaches, they'll signpost it seamlessly in the back. Likewise, that's what the Growth Hub, I think, should be doing. It's kind of that thing about, you know, if the really elegant systems are the one where all the stuff happens behind the curtain. And that's the kind of challenge for me. I think that's the sort of space that we can get into. And why reinvent the wheel? So if there's somebody out there with a particular strength on, let's say, import, export, kind of, you know, helping people through it, well, let's not recreate that somewhere else. Let's build on the strength that we've got. It's those kind of principles.
Got some questions coming in. Gentleman at the back, if you can introduce yourself, tell us who you are. And
I don't know if I need a mic, so I'll just, Stuart Thomas from Berries. Obviously lots of fantastic ideas, initiatives, you know, some real energy and passion in the room. I just got a specific question about, I am going to use the mic, sorry. Just in terms of, you know, the context of that is that there's a tremendous amount of strain on the public purse, and the challenges of public sector funding are kind of evident and talked about an awful lot. So I'm just interested in the council's kind of strategy for making the money that they have available to them go further, and what ideas and thoughts you have around that.
do you want to take that one, Ed, first? That's a constant quandary, isn't it?
Yeah. I think we're all acutely aware of the revenue challenges that local authorities face. And also, you know, if we're trying to put capital investment in, there is always going to be a revenue implication as well. So it is balancing that fine line. And ultimately, you know, a lot of the support that the council puts in isn't something that we have to do. Certain things we have to do, such as adult social care, children's social care. You know, those are our key priorities to make sure people are cared for and kept safe within Shropshire. However, you know, we recognise that it is very important that we support the economic development of Shropshire. We support businesses to provide growth, to provide employment, and hopefully, as we discussed it in one of the earlier sessions, that if we can keep people who are living in Shropshire in their own homes longer without needing the support of, say, social care or pressures on the NHS, that's vitally important. And we've all got a role to play in that, whether it be the local authority, whether it be the private sector, whether it be innovation, whether it be people providing the right sort of housing within the county. So it is a fine balance with how can we can balance that with the constraints we have. And I think there's no easy answer. We have to navigate what is put in front of us in terms of the budgets and the budgets we've faced, the not having the long-term guarantees around fairer funding and things like that. It is almost hand to mouth in some respects, and I think we'd all like to have a bit more certainty moving forward. But this is why it's really important we have this collaborative working, and I think this is something that's come out of the Economic Recovery Partnership, is that is starting to build and something we can take forward, hopefully.
And Tracy, I'd written down access to finance / funding as one of the half a dozen main bullet points from listening to all the debates today. So
exactly. And you know, the local authority, I think there's the expectation that, you know, you come to the local authority, they'll have money and they'll invest in. And I think it's just that different that different way now that, you know, that isn't the case always. So it's about how can we sometimes match fund things, you know, how can we support a business maybe with matching what they're doing, or alternatively helping them put in bids as well. So, you know, speaking to somebody yesterday, you know, the starting point was, you know, we need money. Well, we haven't got it to support that scheme, but we can help you submit a bid, you know, we can support you through that. So I think it's just looking at creative and innovative ways of helping each other. It isn't always that the council has, you know, a big pot of money that we can just, you know, chuck at any scheme. So, you know, so I think it's, you know, just looking at it in a wider way.
Put your thinking caps on, because I'm going to ask you in about 5 or 6 minutes one big question before we sum up. If money was no object, what would you want for Shropshire? What would be your number one absolute point? So have a little think about that. Before we do, I mean, James, you touched on funding for some of the help for businesses in education before, didn't you? Is it flexible enough to give Shropshire businesses what they want, do you think, at the moment?
No, because there's huge amounts of regulation and auditing of which is appropriate, but the level of regulation means that it meets the needs which are identified at a top level in central government. It doesn't focus on what the needs are of an individual county, and a lot of education policy is very London-centric and very metro-centric. I mean, the biggest challenge really for us with our 16 to 18-year-olds is transport and people being able to access education post-16. The local authority does provide support with that, but you know, that would be one thing that I would certainly ask for as being something further. And in Manchester, there is free, you know, 16 to 18 travel. In London, there's free 16 to 18 travel. It's ridiculous. It's a statutory requirement that you're in education or training to the age of 18, and yet it isn't funded to the age of 18 with support for transport.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question over here.
Thank you, Julian Dean and Councillor. Coming back to the big slogan on the wall, invest in Shropshire, I'm just interested, you know, you've talked about the difficulties with public money, but Ed's first slide told us that actually the amount of private money that is getting invested in Shropshire was above target. I recently heard Dean Carroll saying, you know, that actually green investment is the most reliable investment, and there are people in the county who want to invest. Is there something that can be done to help people invest in the journey to zero carbon in the county? You know, the people who have pots of money and are looking for those opportunities to bring together the businesses that are on that journey with those people here who are looking to invest.
Who wants to go first on that one?
You're looking at me.
I am, yeah.
Yeah. I think there's a complex answer to that in some ways. I mean, for me, part of it is how can we help bring the infrastructure into the county that then other people can use and access. So, you know, for example, one of the things that we're looking at is, you know, if we could switch the bus fleet into a hydrogen-fueled fleet, could that create, you know, hydrogen generation facility, green hydrogen locally, that then other kind of people could kind of access to, you know, including, you know, not just large vehicles, but smaller vehicles too. So there's a bit about being a catalyst for some private sector infrastructure investment. There's another bit about, and one of the things that James and I have talked about is you know, as we're developing, you know, bigger clusters of kind of skills around things like air source heat pumps and, you know, PV panels and, you know, other forms of, you know, low carbon technology, actually, where do the people that work in those industries get that skill uplift from? You know, and the kind of like, almost like evening CPD, you know, programs for the existing suite of plumbers who may want to convert into someone who knows how to do ground source heat pump. That's a kind of a space that we can kind of start to think about how we enable. So I think our role is really an enabling kind of role. We just kind of try and get all the conditions in place that allow businesses to get on with it and allow the demand to be released, really. Of course, there isn't, as you know, a kind of a coordinated single pot of cash for this that comes out of government. And I think there's always that challenge for how we put a green angle on that stuff. We all talk about the green and digital recovery. What does that really mean? I think it is a massive opportunity for us. And as long as we can kind of deliver that, actually we'll carry on going in the direction that we need. And ultimately, the minute we can help make it affordable for consumers to do things, then the whole thing takes off, doesn't it? That's the key bit. It's that spaceship that, you know, it takes all the power to leave Earth's orbit. It flies in space with next to no energy. It's that bit we've just got to help the whole green sector get to, I think. And
James, Mark mentioned you've been already in dialogue as well. So where are you on this one?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I'll give you an illustration which goes back to the point I made a moment ago. We opened a new automotive engineering centre at our London Road campus, which is a really good example of the college investing its money, support from the local, from the Marches Let, and support from local businesses. Two of the areas that we've got really state-of-the-art equipment for are hybrid and electrical technology. The qualifications nationally have taken out hybrid technology. So we don't actually need to train people to qualify as motor vehicle technicians in that technology. We are still going to do so because it's what's needed and it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do. But actually, there is the potential that the funding doesn't ask us to do that, and the way in which we're regulated doesn't ask us to do that. So we're having to rely on the fact that common sense will prevail when somebody looks at what it is that we're doing with that group of students. Running alongside that, then, yes, we absolutely do need to be looking at these particular areas of work. Need to be minded that if you're looking at, say, apprenticeships in plumbing, where new standards are looking at new technologies, of course, people still have old boilers. And therefore, you do still need to have people who are trained with those skills until that change has been made. But we absolutely, as a college, want to be at the front of this change that Mark's talking about, and working with the local authority and working with business on providing that type of training. I think is a really exciting part of the sort of the 5-year and the 25-year future.
And Ed, it sort of brings in that, doesn't it, the whole issue about making sure everything's joined up properly, doesn't it?
I think there's a bit around clustering our green industries. We don't have many of our industries and businesses clustered within Shropshire. We have a lot of green businesses that are very widely dispersed. Bringing them together, being a beacon as a county, look, this is what we're doing, this is what we can achieve, bringing together our existing businesses and also helping to attract new businesses into the county as well by providing those opportunities. That could be facilitated both through the local authority and also through the private sector as well.
I'm conscious of the time, and I want to ask you about your money no object question in a moment, but I know we've got time for one last question from the back.
Hi, Ray Flynn, University of Wolverhampton. Really interesting discussion today, and it's going to point a very exciting trajectory. And it got me thinking about kind of 2027 and the conversations which were kind of interlaced with references to the future and young people. And I guess my question really is where the young person's voice is in the direction of travel. This is setting kind of conditions up to 2027 where kind of older mid-teenagers will be the entrepreneurs of the future. And it's just where do they fit into the exercise, really.
I was going to come to Tracy first, but I guess I ought to go to James first on that one, hadn't I? So.
Well, I mean, you're assuming that I've got a good answer to that question. I mean, I think it goes back to the point I made earlier that are we talking about demand or supply? Are we talking about that very complex interrelationship between the two things? We have a demand-led system. Students will choose the things that they will study at the age of 14, at the age of 16, and at the age of 18. What we have to make sure is that they have sufficient advice and guidance and good quality information that allows them to make informed choices. So I think the point about the student voice is about making sure that they have a well-informed voice so that they can make clear what it is they want. I mean, ultimately, colleges absolutely, universities absolutely, schools to an extent will have a curriculum for young people that reflects what it is that they want to study. Because the way in which funding mechanisms work and regulatory systems work is we respond to that demand. The challenge is about making sure that people properly understand what the opportunities are with the particular pathways that they may go down. I mean, one of the things that I do in my day job is that I go and talk to year 11s in schools. And in fact, I couldn't go to a school this morning. They wanted to do it remotely. So before the start, between 8:30 and 9 o'clock, I did a remote presentation to a school. There's a digital advancement that we've had over the last 18 months. And I make a point, which is that I put up all the different courses that we offer, and then I point out that there's one course where you can be earning £50,000 a year by the age of 18 or 19, because it's about skill, not about experience or age. And it's the bricklaying, because you can earn £1,000 a week if you can lay 1,000 bricks a day. because there is this desperate shortage. Now, since I've been saying that same thing for about 4 years. I've quadrupled the number of bricklayers that I've got. I've had to open two new brick centres, and I still can't meet the demand within Shropshire for those particular construction skills.
It's obviously working then, what you're saying. So.
Yeah, you've got to be careful, haven't you, what you say?
Yeah.
Tracy?
And I think just for this, this economic strategy, the economic prosperity that we're discussing today, I think, your question around how do young people engage in that process is a really important point. So today is the launch of the workshops and the consultation exercise we're going to be doing. And it's very much in our minds that we need to engage with young people so they input into this process because, of course, we have ideas around how we think young people are going to live their lives by the time they get to, to working age, but they may have a completely different perspective on it. And I think also the point that Mark made earlier in his presentation about, the jobs of the future, we don't actually know what they are here today, even for those that are in sort of primary school, just coming into secondary school already, their jobs may be jobs that we don't even know, don't even exist at the moment. So, they need to be at the table to talk about how they see their future. So I think that's a really important point.
Can I just make a point just to build on? This is an example that came from a conversation with the chief exec of Cisco. And that was that there are real recruitment issues for, high quality telecommunication engineers. And only 18% of applications were coming from females. So they dropped the word engineer and they just talked about capabilities and skill levels and described the job in terms of, what impact it had. Instantly, overall levels went up. Instantly, the 50-50 balance in genders went up. And they got better quality applicants all round. And I think it's just really something interesting about the language we use when we describe what roles we're kind of trying to bring on and how we engage people. And that reaches down into when young people are making decisions, at year 6 and 7, quite often, there's a bit about, well, what are those options? And there is an issue about the careers advice that exists within the kind of schools community. And in my view, there's a bit about, maybe in that simplification bit we talked about, videos online and more information online. For me, that could be a really big opportunity. If we think about cascading more information to people making career choices and decisions, that could be really important. And the other side of it, I've got 2 girls that have been through university. I can't tell you how many of their friends emerged out of university with no idea what they wanted to do. They just kind of jumped on the conveyor belt without really any thought. And I think that's an issue for all of us, to really think about how we shape that interest. And it's often important to understand what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do. And the whole work experience bit kind of, I think, plays a little bit in there. So that's a really big challenge for me.
Don't forget, dream project on your bucket list coming up in 30 seconds, but last word to Ed.
Yeah, just briefly on that, I think there's two ideas I think we could work on. One is our enterprise advisors that go into our education settings who provide schools with advice and support around bringing employers into schools, but also I think they can bring back the message from the young people back through that network to us as a local authority, but also to wider businesses about what young people want. And then secondly, I've spoken briefly with Tracy about this, and this might be news to the leader of the council, but I think we should be exploring the options of a youth council for Shropshire, where the voices of young people can be heard and represented. So I know that's something we've spoken about briefly, and that's something that I'd like to explore with the portfolio holder for young people in the county. So I think there's opportunities there to move that forward.
Excellent. Thanks, you folks. I'm going to come to you for your if money was no object question first, but let me throw it out to the floor first if anybody's got 3 or 4. This is going, I guess this will be the footnote on the report, the big asks question really. If money was no object and you could just ask for one thing for Shropshire right now, what would it be? Anybody want to? Richard, hold on, microphone coming. No. I know you can shout, but microphone. Our streaming audience needs to hear you, Richard.
I'd like to see a long-term approach to any financial support that comes into the area, and I'd like to see genuine local decision making with the handcuffs off that stops influencing decision makers and guiding down particular routes that are delivered by central government. We should be able to make decisions that we can look after our own communities far, far better than we actually can, because behind the scenes, of course, there are all sorts of constraints. So kind of long-winded answer, but that would be the wish for me.
Excellent. Anybody else? I can see at least one more hand over there, maybe two. 1.5 hands, I think, over there. So
Money's no object. Free bus every hour, every village.
simple as that. Excellent.
An electrified Wolverhampton to Shrewsbury train line.
Oh, that got a murmur of approval, that did. That's good. Anybody else before I throw it out to the panel? Okay, go on, I'll go left to right this time. Ed?
I'd like to see fairer funding brought forward so that Shropshire would benefit from fairer funding, the fairer funding model, and I think that's something we deserve, and it would enable us as a local authority. It's a great place to live and work. There's no denying that. We all have our gripes, we all have our moans. We're very fortunate to live here, but that would make all our lives much easier, and it would certainly make our lives as councillors much easier.
James?
Well, it's partly for Shropshire, but it's going to sound very parochial. I need 120 million quid for a town centre campus, and I know exactly where it goes because it's one of the sites that have been vacated.
I thought you were going to say free public transport for everybody up to the age of 18.
That's been done.
Yes. Tracy?
And I think it's, for me, it's, you know, locking the doors and stopping our young people escaping out of Shropshire. So keeping them in Shropshire so that they develop their careers in Shropshire and develop our businesses in Shropshire.
I think this civil liberties approach is
Yeah.
issues with that, isn't there, a little bit? But Mark?
A little bit of what Richard said, but I think firstly for me, I think business rates is a bust system, to be honest. I think, you know, we completely need a different way of kind of incentivising business growth. And then the other bit really is let's get a fair share of our funding pie, whatever that is, you know, that kind of sense of, you know, Shropshire getting its equal and fair share of whatever exists nationally. We've got to fight for that with as much flexibility, you know. So think of it like this. 95% of all tax raised from business goes directly to government. The other 5% is business rates. Half of that goes to government. Only 2.5% of all taxes from business has any kind of local degree on it. You know, you guys should be able to influence where some of the tax that business grows from. That would be my wish, that we have a different fiscal system with more local flexibility to it.
Excellent. Thanks for all your questions. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch with us on the streaming service as well. And thanks to our panel. Mark's going to stay around for some closing remarks, but can we just say thanks to our other three panellists? You can go and take a comfy chair. Thank you very much, folks.